Good morning. This will be lesson number 36 in our study in the book of Acts. It'll cover the 24th chapter of the book of Acts. I'm recording this at home, mainly because our church office is closed since the heat is not working in the office area, and I've been told it's a bone-chilling 44 degrees in the office area. So I've been home the last couple of days. Hopefully they'll have that fixed sometime late tomorrow or Thursday. We'll see what happens. In the meantime, I thought I would just tape a short lesson for Acts chapter 24 that we might be able to delve into Thursday night if we finish off our previous lesson more quickly. So let me read for us Acts chapter 24, and it reads as follows. And after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with some elders and a spokesman, one Tertullus. They laid before the governor their case against Paul, and when he had been summoned, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, "Since through you we enjoy much peace, and since by your foresight, most excellent Felix, reforms are being made for this nation, in every way and everywhere we accept this with all gratitude. But to detain you no further, I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly. For we have found this man a plague, one who stirs up riots among all Jews throughout the world, and he is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, but we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to find out from him about everything in which we accuse him." The Jews also joined in the charge, affirming that all these things were so. And when the governor had nodded to him to speak, Paul replied, "Knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. You can verify that it is not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem, and they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogues of the city. But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets, having a hope in God which these men themselves accept, that there will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. So I always take pains to have a clear conscience toward both God and man. Now after several years I came to bring alms to my nation and to present offerings. While I was doing this, they found me purified in the temple, without any crowd or tumult. But some Jews from Asia, they ought to be here before you and to make an accusation, should they have found anything against me. Or else let these men themselves, say what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the council. Other than this one thing that I cried out while standing among them, it is with respect to the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you this day." But Felix, having a rather accurate knowledge of the way, put them off, saying, "When Lysias the tribune comes down, I will decide your case." Then he gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept in custody, but have some liberty, and that none of his friends should be prevented from attending to his needs. After some days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was a Jew, and he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Christ Jesus. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control in the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, "Go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you." At the same time, he hoped that money would be given him by Paul. So he sent for him often and conversed with him. When 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. So we know that Paul has been taken by horseback with upwards of 470 Roman soldiers from Jerusalem to Caesarea. And most of those soldiers stopped halfway and went back to Jerusalem, but those on horseback continued to take Paul on to Caesarea, where he would stand before Felix in a trial under the Roman rules. And Felix knew that the Council of Jerusalem had been called and ordered to come down and to give charges as to why Paul was to stand trial. And so Paul was kept under guard in Caesarea, and he awaited for the high priest and for the rest of the council to come down. Now, what's interesting here is that after 5 days, it says Ananias came down with some of the elders and with a spokesman, one called Tertullus. And they were going to lay before the governor their case. Now, what's interesting here is that Tertullus is not a Jew. He is not a member of the council of the Jews. Tertullus was a lawyer, and he was a lawyer mainly for high Roman citizens, people who had money, who had means. He would be the high-priced lawyer that you would bring in, and he would defend you before Roman courts. And he was known for winning almost all of his cases. And he was quite wealthy, and he was quite good at what he did. So I think we see here the cunning of the Jewish council and of the high priest Ananias. He has secured this Tertullus to come and give an account before the king, before the governor, because he knows that Tertullus has a good standing with the local governors of all of the regions surrounding Jerusalem for all of Israel. Now, Tertullus comes and he begins his accusation by saying some flattering things to Felix. He says, "Since through you we enjoy much peace, and since by your foresight, most excellent Felix, reforms are being made for this nation in every way and everywhere, we accept this with all gratitude. But we don't want to detain you any further, so I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly." Now, what's really interesting here is that he butters up Felix by saying, "Since we enjoy much peace, and since by your foresight reforms are being done for this nation, we accept this with all gratitude." Well, first off, Tertullus is not a Jew. Second off, Felix was not held in high esteem by the Jews. As a matter of fact, riots and disruptions had increased since Felix had become governor. The Jews were not at all happy with Felix. And Tertullus should know that. And what's really more interesting is that most of the Romans did not like Felix either. There is, R. Kent Hughes mentioned in his book, as well as in many of the other books, that Roman historians say that Felix was a terrible governor. They said that he ruled as a Roman, but he ruled with the mindset of a slave. Now, the reason for that was he was a slave. He had come to his position as governor through his brother, Pallas. Pallas was one who had bought his influence into the Roman culture. He had purchased his citizenship, and he was an excellent politician, finding favor with many of the Romans who were throughout this region. And Pallas, wanting to be nice to his brother Felix, is the one who got Felix a position as a governor here. It wasn't because he was a good governor. It wasn't because he had excellent administrative skills or handling of the Roman rules. It's just that Pallas bought his influence and got his brother to be governor. And all the historians of Rome basically say Felix was a terrible governor. So here we have the Jewish High Council bringing in a highfalutin lawyer who has good standing with Roman courts, who charges lots of money, and who butters up Felix. He is going after Felix with flattery. Oh, most Felix the Great, you are making good reforms for this nation. You have been bringing peace. You are great. But I don't want to detain you any further, so we will make our declaration to you brief. It's all flattery. It's all buttering Felix up. None of it is true. If anybody knew what was going on, they would see right through this. But frankly, Felix isn't going to see right through it because Felix likes to be buttered up. That also is something historians wrote about him. He could be bought for a price. He could be purchased to make decisions. We even see that toward the end of this chapter. It says that Felix listened to Paul often, hoping that Paul would pay him money. That falls right in line with who Felix is. But that's later in the chapter. Let's get back to this and see what's going on here. To detain you no further, Tertullus says, I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly, for we have found this man a plague. This man stirs up riots among all the Jews in all the world, and is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarene. Now, these are falsehoods. They are totally against everything that really was going on. But they have the appearance of truth because the Jews that came down from Asia, from Ephesus, have come in and said Paul is an instigator of riots. Paul caused riots in Philippi. He caused riots in Ephesus. He caused riots throughout Greece and Asia, which it really wasn't Paul causing the riots. It was this disgruntled set of Jews that caused the riots. But they're the ones that are bringing the accusation against Paul, and Tertullus is just bringing this up. What's really interesting is Tertullus doesn't even have any first-hand knowledge of what Paul has done or what the problems have been. Everything he has, he's hearing from these others. And they're not even there at this trial. So there's no way to even confirm all this. But he's telling Felix that Paul is stirring all this up, and he adds one final step onto this. He says, Paul profaned the temple, but we seized him. We got him, and we didn't let him profane the temple. Now, that part might have a little bit of truth to it. They did seize Paul, and Felix knows this because of the tribune who wrote to him and said, we found Paul being beat in the temple, and we rescued him because we knew he was a Roman citizen, which, if you remember last lesson, that was a falsehood. They didn't know that he was a Roman citizen when they rescued him. It appears here that everybody is trying to butter up Felix to keep their jobs, to keep their heads, to maybe get what they want in a verdict from Felix. So, anyway, they've said that we found him, we seized him, so we stopped the riot, when in actuality they had started the riot, and truly it was the Roman centurions and soldiers who stopped the riot. But They stop right there. That is their brief discourse before Felix. Basically, Paul's an instigator of riots throughout all of Greece, in Asia, throughout Ephesus, Philippi, and now in Jerusalem. He is a ringleader of a sect. In other words, he is a political disaster waiting to happen for Rome. That's a good thing to get Felix upset and wanting to give Paul trouble. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my cat. There, Snowy wanted you all to see him. So here's Snowy. Anyway, at this moment, we're told that the governor in verse 10 nods to Paul to speak. And Paul, knowing that for many years, replies, knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. Now notice all he states is truth. For many years you have been a judge, and so I cheerfully make my defense. He didn't try to flatter him. He didn't try to butter him up like Tertullus did. He just made the truthful statement. And then he says, you can verify what I'm going to tell you. It wasn't but 12 days ago that I came up to Jerusalem, and I did not dispute with anyone. I did not stir up a crowd either in the temple or in the synagogues of the city. Neither can they prove to you the charges that they bring up against me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets, having a hope in God. And he goes on, and he talks about all that's going on with him declaring the resurrection. And then he says down in verse 18, while I was doing this, they found me purified in the temple to present offerings. They brought some Jews from Asia, though, and they ought to be the ones here before you to make their accusation should they have anything else against me, because those men from Asia are the ones who are declaring that I am the problem. Or let these men declare to you the problems that they have with me. But it is with respect to the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you this day. Nothing else. Now, we're told in the next verse, verse 22, that Felix has a rather accurate knowledge of the way, in that he puts them off at this point, saying, we will wait for Lysias, the tribune, to come down, and then I will decide your case. Now, how does Felix have a knowledge of the Jewish culture? It's because he married Drusilla. Drusilla, who was raised in a Jewish home, raised as a Jew, knew the culture, knew the religion, and she had shared with her husband about this religion. Felix had married her. As a matter of fact, this was his third marriage, and it was her second marriage. And they really had broken many laws, even of the Romans, in some of the things they did with their marriages, but for sure they broke the Jewish law. One, Drusilla, because she was a divorced woman who did not have a legal divorce, but two, she married a Roman, not another Jewish person. She did not abide by the Jewish law. But she told Felix all about it. So Felix had some inclination as to the Jews and the things of the Jews. He would understand the charge that the Jews were bringing, that Paul defiled the temple by going in there and taking with him Greeks or others. That would be something he would understand. He would also understand that Paul was going there for a purification ritual. And if he could verify that, he would know that Paul did not defile the temple in Jerusalem. So there are things that he could learn. But he put everyone off because, frankly, being the bad governor that he was, he really didn't like making decisions regarding things like this. And so he put him off and said, hey, we're going to wait until Lysias the tribune can come. Now, that's kind of a pain in the neck for the high priest Ananias and for the elders and for Tertullus, because you see, it took them 5 days to get things together and to travel the distance down to or up to Caesarea, and they got there 5 days later, and now they're going to have to wait for a message to be sent to the tribune and for the tribune to then come and be present. And they really can't leave because they have to be there when the tribune comes, because they've got to make sure that things go in their favor. This is going to be costly for them. They've got to pay Tertullus to stick around, and he's not cheap. Well, then we find out that Paul is kept in custody, but he is under house arrest, which is truly how you would keep a Roman citizen in custody. You would not keep him bound. You would not keep him in a jail. You would allow him to stay in his own lodgings, and you would allow his friends to attend to his needs. And that's what we're told happened here. So Paul has a fairly reasonable detention at this point, and he can see his friends and he can spend time with them, and his needs are taken care of. Then we're told after some days Felix came with his wife Drusilla, and we get a little bit there that she was Jewish, and they sent for Paul and let him speak about his faith in Christ Jesus. And he reasons with them, he tells them all about it. He talks about the righteousness, self-control, and the coming judgment. Felix grows concerned. Actually, the word here is alarmed, and says, go away for the present time. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you. Felix grows alarmed because he has been hearing from others that he and Drusilla have been breaking the law and breaking rules, and especially the Jewish laws. And now there's a Jewish Pharisee here under trial who tells him that God is coming and God will bring judgment. And Felix grows alarmed because he knows if it's true, he's going to be judged, and it's not going to be good. But then the truth comes out. The next verse 28 says, at the same time, he hoped that money would be given him by Paul. So he sent for him often and conversed with him. There's the truth. Felix's true nature comes out. He wants money. He wants to be paid. He wants Paul to give a bribe so that he will give a favorable hearing to Paul. Now, Felix had the ability to declare Paul innocent and to let him go. But we all know that this is leading up to the fact that Paul is going to end up in Rome. That is where Paul is supposed to end up by the will of God. But Felix could have let him go. But Felix doesn't want to do it because he wants money. He wants to be paid. Now, the last verse in this chapter tells us something semi-alarming. When 2 years had lapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and desiring to do the Jews a favor, he left Paul imprisoned. 2 years. For 2 years, he's been having Paul come back and forth and talk to him. And he's been hoping for money from Paul. He's been hoping to get a bribe. 2 years. I can guarantee you that Ananias, the elders, and Tertullus did not stick around for 2 years. Neither did the tribune. This trial was over. This trial ended 2 years before this last line. But Felix wanted a bribe. Felix did not want to let Paul go until Paul had paid him money. And he covers it up at the end by saying He leaves him in prison as a favor to the Jews. Felix is all about favors. He's all about bribes. He's all about getting another foot up the ladder in the Roman political system. Now, when Felix was replaced here, he left, and according to historians for Rome, within the next few years, Felix and Drusilla would be deposed. They would fall from favor with Caesar and with Rome. They were not going to go very much further. But for right now, Paul is left under house arrest for 2 years because he wouldn't pay a bribe. But he was able to reason and talk often with Felix. Well, that's pretty much what goes on here. What we see here is the corruption of the legal system that was happening in Israel at the time. The corruption because of corrupt politicians. What's real interesting for me is the fact that politicians haven't changed in 2,000 years. They still are looking out often for themselves. They still want bribes, or they couch it now in the sense of they need money in their war chest for their next run for political office. And so you can donate to their campaign. Well, we also know that there are many politicians who have fallen to bribes, many politicians who have used their position to gain influence and power for themselves. That's not the point of what we're after here. The point of what we're after here is that God is protecting Paul. God is taking care of Paul, even though Paul is going under the trial, even though Paul could be accused of these many things. God is protecting Paul because even Tertullus, the most famous lawyer in that area at that time, could not get a guilty verdict against Paul. Felix, because of his own corruption, wouldn't give that guilty verdict. Now, he doesn't let Paul go, but he also doesn't find him guilty of all the charges the Jews brought against him. So, God is protecting, God is caring for Paul, God is allowing his friends to see to his needs and to spend time with him, even though for 2 years Paul is sitting in Caesarea, unable to go anywhere else to carry out the ministry that God has given him. But God has a plan. God has a purpose. And we'll see that as we go through the next few chapters. Look forward to seeing you all on Thursday night. God bless. Take care. Goodbye.